Do you have an ever-growing pile of books that you still need to read? A never-ending list of books that sound interesting to you? Do you not know which book to pick up first because there are just so many options and then you kind of just end up watching Netflix instead? Don't worry, I got you, because today I'm going to be giving you recommendations for that specific book that you're looking for so you know what to read next. Hello, welcome. My name is Leonie. Welcome. I already said that. Anyway, I asked you guys on Twitter and on Instagram to give me requests for book recommendations, very specific things that you're looking for in a book, and based on those requests, I will give you book recommendations. I wore my nice shirt today to really give off that like cool Victorian librarian vibes, except it's definitely not real silk at all. Would have loved to film this in front of my bookshelves, which are over there, but frankly, they are kind of a mess. So we're just sitting down, but if you see me looking over there or walking to there, it's because I'm grabbing a book from my bookshelf that fits the prompt. Let's just hop into it very quickly. The first request is a book that makes you feel like you are in a Studio Ghibli movie. So for this one, I want to recommend one that I've read years ago that I don't have here in my room even, and it is called Baker's Magic. It is a middle grade novel about magical bakeries and magic that revolves around baking, and it's just a very fun and silly and cute adventure story. The landscapes and the nature in the book really reminds me of like Howl's Moving Castle, you know, and that very small but whimsical magical element I think really hits the nail on the head for the Ghibli vibes. Then a book that feels like riding the bus late at night. For this one, I would choose A Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. To me, riding the bus late at night is that meeting point between calm and beautiful and eerie, and also kind of scary. I think Mexican Gothic is both very beautiful and vibey in its imagery, but it's still a light horror story, so it also has some creepy elements to it. Feminist essays other than Trick Mirror. So if you enjoy reading feminist books, specifically in the format of essays, I would actually recommend some authors. Rebecca Solnit writes a bunch of great essay collections, but especially Men Explain Things to me is feminism focused, and also Roxane Gay writes a lot of very good essays. I've read Bad Feminist by her, a fantasy standalone with a deep and beautiful story that leaves you in awe. Okay, I have you know which book I'm gonna pick for this, right? It's Piranesi. You perfectly described Piranesi by Susanna Clark. It's a standalone fantasy that takes place in this mysterious hall, and the main character is trying to figure out why he's there and what's going on. It's very beautiful, it goes quite deep, and will definitely leave you in awe because it just goes places that you would not expect the book to go. There were actually quite a lot of prompts surrounding like Studio Ghibli, which I totally understand. I would also love to read more books that have a Studio Ghibli vibe. The first one is Dark Academia meets Studio Ghibli. If I could ever be an aesthetic, I would want to be Dark Academia meets Studio Ghibli. And the book for it, okay, you have to hear me out on this one, okay? I would choose Miss Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. It feels very Ghibli, it felt very summery, very sunshiny, but also with a deeper layer of getting to know people. But also, although this book technically doesn't fit Dark Academia because there's no academia involved at all, the book still feels Dark Academia, I think, because it has a rather ambitious main character, and it also feels like the kind of books that Dark Academia people would be reading. A classic that gives up Ghibli vibes. The best one that I could think of is one that I actually haven't read myself, but I did want to mention because I think it really fits the vibe, and I have seen the movie, but that is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. It has that perfect cottagecore Ghibli vibe that also dives deep into the characters. A book to read during a sunny spring-summer afternoon while having a picnic date. Now for this one, I would actually recommend a book that has a Ghibli movie based on it, and that is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This is that perfect cozy fantasy spring sunshine vibes, just vibes story. Dark green academia for passionate guardians. I love the idea of dark green academia, and I have the perfect book for it as well. Also, I will take any opportunity to recommend this book, but of course, it is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. A lot of people asked for books with like a magical forest or like a dark forest, and I also think it kind of has dark green academia vibes in the sense that our main character gets wished away to the tower of this evil wizard, and he teaches her magic, and she kind of goes through like learning how to use this magic in this tower, which has a dark academia vibe, but also evil forests that will eat you. Fantasy that is both cozy and dark. I will go with The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Although this is a book that I personally couldn't really get into, I do think that it is the perfect book to anyone who is looking for a dark and cozy fantasy. It is based on Russian folklore, has a very wintry, cozy vibe, but it gets quite dark and rather creepy and eerie with all the demons that it includes. Don't be discouraged by the fact that it wasn't for me. It is a widely loved book, and I think that if you're looking for the specific prompt, then this book would be perfect for you. Something humorous, cynical, and heartwarming at the same time. Here I want to recommend a sci-fi. It's a short book, part of a series, and that is the All Systems Red series by Martha Wells. I don't know why I'm suddenly deciding that here is where I want to put the picture. Anyway, picture here. This is a sci-fi story where you basically follow in the head of a robot. This robot has a very humorous voice, very relatable, kind of cynical about the world. But in that sense, it's also kind of heartwarming because in a way you kind of start relating to this robot, this humorous robot. A chill, mundane book that taught you a lot about life plus some philosophy. Here, I think I know which book I want to pick for this. A classic on this channel, it is The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff. It's very chill and mundane because it is just the author having a conversation with Winnie the Pooh. You know, this book has become so normal for me, but sometimes when I describe what it's about, I realize how odd it might sound if you're not familiar with this book. But yes, it is the author having a conversation with Winnie the Pooh, because Winnie the Pooh actually embodies perfectly the philosophies of Taoism, but it has a very chill vibe to it because they're just having conversations, and it's definitely really influenced a lot of my outlook on life, and I return to it very often. Then we have a book that feels like home and is for all ages. I Raise You, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, because I think this is a Dutch edition. I actually nicked this off my childhood books shelf that was like stowed away in the attic at my parents' house. I didn't even know that I owned this, but apparently child me had this book and I took it with me. It's mine now. This is definitely a book that feels like home because it is so wholesome and childlike, but it is also for all ages because it has this kind of childlike outlook that is very valuable for people any age to return to. A standalone, underrated YA fantasy with an epic female lead. For this one, I would like to recommend To Kill a Kingdom. I don't know if this counts as underrated because it's very popular, but I do feel it's underrated, as in people don't love it as much as I did. It's a standalone fantasy, which is already a win. It revolves around a romance between a siren and a pirate, and the main character is very badass. I mean, she's a siren. She like kills people. The next prompt just says, I'm thinking band, 70s, 90s. Now, maybe you already know about this book, but the perfect book for this prompt is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you love documentary style, grand epic stories that follow the creation of a band in the 70s and follows them through the 80s and the 90s, perfect book. Something that gives you a lump in your throat the whole book, but doesn't quite make you cry. Now, this is exactly how I've personally described my experience with the following book. Normal People by Sally Rooney. It is the kind of melancholic exploration of a relationship between two people. Very melancholic, very sad, but it wouldn't necessarily, it's not tragic. It just hits deep, you know? A book with characters that learn to love themselves. For this one, I would recommend Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, which follows the story of a woman who is very just out of touch with her life and reality, and you kind of follow her as she slowly learns to get her life back on track. It's very funny and then also really sad, and it kind of makes you laugh and then also cry. A book that will make me think a lot about it after I finish it. I'll give a non-fiction recommendation, and that is Men's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. This follows the story of the author as he talks about his experience in the Second World War in the camps, which mostly revolves around finding meaning in life, and it's definitely the kind of book that makes you think about it long thereafter. A book with a teenage nostalgic feeling. So when it comes to nostalgic feelings, I always think of Kazuo Ishiguro, and I would specifically recommend Never Let Me Go. It is kind of a dystopian story that follows also the coming of age of three friends. To me, it has a very nostalgic teenage feeling because you follow them growing up, so mostly also in their teenage years. And Kazuo Ishiguro is just really good at instilling this nostalgic, melancholic atmosphere into his books. A book that feels like peaceful drowning, but you don't want to get above water. I think this kind of describes how I felt when I was reading My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Tessa Moshfegh. We follow a very privileged, kind of annoying main character, but she also struggles deeply with depression. She decides to just sleep for an entire year and go through an entire year in this dazed state that is very well conveyed by the author and makes you as the reader also, it kind of gives you this drowning feeling, but you don't want to get above water, because that is the power of this book. I feel like we're definitely in the kind of more like sad, melancholic prompt territory here. The next prompt is a book about death and dying in a reflective way. Actually recently read the perfect book for this. It is Mrs. Death by Selena Godin. It is a speculative story about the personification of death, Mrs. Death. It reflects on life, our society, the ending and the beginning of life. Very reflective, keeps a very humorous tone as well, and I really think this is exactly what you're looking for. The next prompt just says, existential crisis, go away, make me feel like it's all gonna be okay. This one was difficult, and I think I maybe am taking a risk with this recommendation, but sometimes when you're going through an existential crisis, you shouldn't try to escape it, but just go straight through it. So I would recommend Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. You know, Jean-Paul Sartre is a philosopher known for existentialism, and it basically follows a man who has an existential crisis. As it says on the back of the book chronicles his struggle with the realization that he is an entirely free agent in a world devoid of meaning. And he has to find his own meaning in his life. It may be a little difficult to get through, but if you are having an existential crisis, I think you might relate to it, and then maybe that will help you get through it. A book about someone who has absolutely no idea what they want to do in life. Relatable. The reason why I love this book so much is because I also didn't know and still don't know what I want to do with my life, just like the main character in this book, and it is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. Wonderful YA contemporary with about a main character struggling with what she wants to do with the rest of her life and how this may be different from what she always thought she wanted to do with her life. Also through a beautiful friendship in a story that is not about two people falling in love. I just realized I got a lot of requests for books about a strong friendship between a boy and a girl that doesn't turn into a romance, and I couldn't think of one. But this one is that as well. I need to get something to drink. My throat hurts. Something that happens in a library and revolves around a library. I actually got a lot of requests for books that are like a library fantasy or a book about books, and for this one I would recommend The Library of the Unwritten. Another book that I personally didn't really vibe with because it's very plot driven, but if you are in a mood for a very plot driven book, this one literally takes place in a library about all of the unfinished books and all of the unfinished characters. It takes place in hell. It's very fun, very fast paced, and if you're looking for a library book, it's literally called The Library of the Unwritten. So now we get into the kind of dark academia section because I got a lot of requests for different types of dark academia stories. The first one, a dark academia that feels magical but isn't the Atlas 6, is a ninth house, which is known to be the Arc Academia. It is known as the Dark Academia book with fantasy elements, specifically necromancy, dark arts, ghosts, etc. Just the occult in general. A book with a gothic atmosphere, Transylvania castle style, with thunders and Sleepy Hollow vibes, but not scary. Now the perfect book for this one is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, I think. Another one that I was personally not a big fan of, but it is widely loved, and one of the things I loved about it was the atmosphere, because it takes place in this special boarding school that has very gothic vibes. It's, I think the first chapter just like immediately starts with like a thunderstorm. It's a mystery thriller story. They're trying to solve a murder, but it's not really scary at any point, which really might be the appeal to a lot of people. Then a book involving an unhealthy codependent relationship where they mess each other up. I love that though. Also, I got many people asking me for a dark academia book recommendation that wasn't Ninth House, wasn't If We Were Villains, wasn't The Secret History, but was perfectly dark academia, and I think I finally found the book, and that is These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerever. It is peak dark academia. It takes place at a university. We have these two very pretentious young boys that are just trying to find someone that truly understands them, and they start this very obsessive, unhealthy, codependent relationship, and it's so good to read. This is good, and I need more people to read this. Dark academia rivals to lovers. So many people asked for this, and I totally understand it because, oh my gosh, that's all I ever want, just a dark academia story, rivals to lovers. Those two tropes are made for each other, but it was honestly, I was surprised that I could only think of one book that has this, and it's not even canon lovers, but it is the Atlas 6. We have Libby and Nico, who are academic rivals, and this is a dark academia, Library of Alexandria kind of story. I'm not yet sure if they're actually gonna end up together, but myself and many other people ship it, and to me this is a very good execution of the academic rivals to hopefully lovers trope. But if anyone has any more recommendations for academic rivals to lovers, preferably in a kind of more like darker or speculative setting, please leave them in the comments down below so that other people can see it as well. A dark academia with elements of magic and humor that isn't YA. Now, there is one dark academia book that I know of that is specifically known to be humorous, and it is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. It takes place in a magical school, and although I personally wasn't a fan of the voice of the writing style, it has a very humorous tone, so if that is what you're looking for, something a little bit more sarcastic, doesn't take itself too seriously, then I think you might really enjoy this. And then the last of the Dark Academia prompts, we have Dark Academia, but make it sci-fi. No better book to recommend here than Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which I think fits the dark academia style because we follow this super ambitious kind of mad scientist that is, it's very university focused at the beginning of the book, and it is sci-fi because it deals with biology, science fictional biology creating this monster. So I think dark academia, but make it sci-fi. Then for the prompt, a cozy page turner that is not scary, a little hidden gem called Girls with Sharp Sticks by Susanna Young. It's a YA thriller mystery about a bunch of girls that are in this facility where they are told how to be good girls, how to be proper, nice, pretty little, cute little girls, are ready to be married off, but they slowly find out that there's more to their facility and there's an outside world, and they're kind of trying to figure out why are they there and is it good what's being done to them. It's definitely not scary, but man, Is it a page turner? It definitely deals with feminist undertones. Underrated, and I highly recommend it. A monster main character. This Savage Song by V. Schwab is a dual POV about a city divided where you follow a human girl who's definitely very monstrous and a monster boy who can turn into like a human form who wants to be less monstrous. Woman goes insane. I love reading about madness. Well, have I got the perfect book for you? You've probably heard about this if you know me. But hey, just another opportunity for me to recommend reading The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Feminist short story about a woman going mad because people don't take her seriously. Talking about women, unhinged women, someone asked for more unhinged women books, which is kind of becoming a trend, and it actually reminds me of the book that I'm currently reading and definitely enjoying. A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. I love the cover, by the way. I love these kind of painting covers. This is about a woman who's a food critic. She loves food. She loves taking men home to sleep with her. And she's also a 100% a psychopath. A serial killer, kills all the men that she sleeps with, and definitely is starting to evolve a taste for them. If you know what I mean. It's cannibalism. I'm referring to cannibalism. Unhinged. Unhinged. But in the best way possible. It's so fascinating. A book to give us hope about the future. I already mentioned Rebecca Solnit before, but Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit is literally about that. Hope in the Dark. They are short essays talking about different ways of approaching hope in a rather hopeless society. Then we have a bunch of prompts for all kinds of fantasy books. And the first one is an easy to read beginner fantasy with some romance. For this one, I'm going to grab the fantasy book that, at least in my experience, like people that I know that haven't really been into reading or not really into fantasy reading, they always start with this book and it sparks like a newfound love for reading, for fantasy. It's Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I think this is the kind of book that breaks expectations that keep people from reading for pleasure or reading fantasy. Like, either because they think that reading is like very boring and takes a long time. This book is super easy to get through, very fast paced. And for fantasy, that people think it's gonna be super hard to get into and get through all of the world building and stuff. This one also doesn't suffer from that at all. The next prompt is a fantasy with elemental magic or elves, fairies, and other woodland creatures. Now for this one, I want to recommend a book to you that I think deserves way more love, that also goes way back. The Iron Fae Saga by Julie Kagawa. It is inspired by A Midsummer Night's Dream. The Fae have a kind of elemental magic. There's winter, summer, and iron. And I remember this book just being so much fun. So if you are in the mood for just a super fun isekai style fantasy fairy story, I think more people should check out this series. Eastern Europe fantasy elements, no romance. Have I got the book for you? Spinning Silver by Naomi Novak. It is a fantasy book that is inspired by Eastern European folklore. It practically has no romance, only if you look really hard, which I do. But if you're not looking for romance, this practically doesn't have any romance in it. Fantastical, magical, wonderful. Easy breezy cover girl. Fantasy book where the ending feels like puzzle pieces coming together. That is one of my favorite things. When that happens in a book, it is an instant love for me, and therefore I will, of course, grab one of my most beloved fantasy books for you. The Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, with the 5th season as its first book. There's no like big plot twist where everything is suddenly revealed. It's more of a, you as the reader slowly piece things together and come to the plot twist conclusion yourself, and it is so well done, and it makes you want to reread it immediately once you finish it. A good fantasy book with a good magic system and little romance to get you out of a reading slump. Now the thing with fantasy books is that they can sometimes be a little bit difficult to get into because, you know, you have to like get to know the entire world first. But one fantasy series where I did not have that problem at all was the A Darker Shade of Magic series by V. Schwab. Super fast-paced, super fun, just pure dopamine shot into your brain. Definitely gonna get you out of the reading slump, I am certain of that. A book with similar vibes to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar: The Last Airbender is it still is one of my favorite series of all time, and it will always remain to be that. So any book that reminds me of Avatar: The Last Airbender is gonna be a win in my game. But one that I immediately thought of, because in the author's note, it is even mentioned that the author was very heavily inspired by Avatar: The Last Airbender because she likes the series so much as well, and that is The Children of Blood and Bone. The only thing that I didn't like is that it clearly tried to do a Zuko, but I do think authors need to realize that no one can do a Zuko. You cannot try to recreate a Zuko character because it will never be as good as the original. Then someone requested a fantasy story with a prehistoric setting. I love this prompt. Unfortunately, I haven't read a book myself that has this, but I did still want to mention one book series that I know of, that people I know really love, that has a prehistoric setting, and that is the Wolf Brothers series. Follows a young boy and his little wolf cub pet as they go on adventures in a prehistoric fantasy setting. The next book recommendation is kind of combining 3 different prompts together, and those are the prompts for a book where different mythologies coexist and it has an adventure element, a heist but not 6 of crows, and a fantasy with a found family, angst, banter, and a cool magic system that isn't medieval. One of my favorite series happens to just have all of them, and that is the Guild of Wolves trilogy by Russian Chakchi. I don't have the first book because I lent it out to a friend. Many different mythologies play a big role in this book series. It's very adventurous. There's kind of a heist. It's more like an adventure, Indiana Jones escape kind of thing. We follow multiple characters that form a found family together. Angsty relationship to like the same vein as Inej and Kaz. And it has a cool magic system that is completely original to the author. And it isn't medieval because it takes place in 19th century Paris, Russia, and Venice. Oof, I'm gonna get comfortable. Another book that combines 2 prompts. First we have a vague plot, but lyrical writing and a romance subplot. And books with vibes like The Night Circus, Starless Sea, and Piranesi. I just realized that this is by the same author actually, but it is The Star-Touched Queen by Russian Chakchi. It is one of those books that is absolutely no plot, just vibes. Technically there is a plot kind of happening towards the end of the book, but that's also where the quality of the books goes downwards. It is very description based and just explores the beautiful magical surroundings. This is one of those books where I use different colors to annotate, and now I no longer remember what the colors mean. A fantasy book where we have the hero's friend as the main character. I do have a book series for this one. It doesn't exactly have like the hero's friend as the main character. There is like a rebellion and all that stuff in this fantasy setting, but the main character is not the leader of the rebellion. She is not the chosen one. She's just helping the actual leader of the rebellion, and it's more about how she finds herself as a part of a whole. And it is the Rebel of the Sands series by Ellen Hamilton. This series is so much fun. Moving on with slightly more romance focused prompts. First we have a sapphic grumpy ex-sunshine trope. For this one I would recommend Written in the Stars by Alexandra Bellafleur. It is literally that. It is a romance between like a lawyer, no, an accountant, I don't know, something serious, and like an astrology girl, and it is very cute, very solid. A book that feels like candy floss. It just, I mean, I just have to go. Red, White, and Royal Blue, it just feels like candy floss. It's an almost ridiculous but wonderful, happy-making romance book. Candy, sugar, happiness. A book without a stupid third act conflict. Honestly, romance books and their third act conflicts. I Raise You Anything by Talia Hibbert. She is so, I mean, her books are great for many, many reasons, but she is so good at writing romance books that they do have something of a conflict in the third act, but it is always, one, very understandable for the characters, and two, quickly resolved, doesn't revolve any annoying miscommunication, it is handled well, and that makes me very, very happy as a romance reader who is tired of seeing the main characters do dumb shit at the end of the book just so that there can be some more conflict. A book that makes you feel all giggly. For this one, I chose Well Met by Jen DeLuca. The banter and the flirting in this book is so good because it is going between like the characters of our two main characters. They don't like each other, but at the Renaissance Fair, they have their own characters, and their characters are super flirty and bantery with each other, and definitely would make me all giggly. And then a good sapphic rom-com. I would go with She Drives Me Crazy. This is a sapphic story between like kind of like a basketball girly and a cheerleader. It's very rom-com-y in my opinion because it's not just about a romance. It dives pretty nicely into the characters. It has some very heartfelt, not forced emotional moments, and I really enjoyed it, and therefore it really has that feeling of like rom-com to me. And then the last one, we're almost there. I have a prompt for short horror stories, preferably based in South America. So for this one, I have a book that I haven't personally read yet, but that I would like to read, and I just want to mention it because it literally perfectly fits your prompt, and that is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed. It is a short story collection about women taking their revenge. It takes place in Brazil, and if I'm correct, is also at least based on folklore there. It won the International Booker Prize, so I'm pretty sure that there's some quality to it. Maybe people in the comments who've read this book can say what they think about it. And there you have it. 50 very specific book recommendations. Feel free to continue this recommendation thing in the comments. Maybe ask for a prompt, and then maybe other people can recommend a book to you based on that prompt that you're asking in the comments, so we can all give each other some recommendations. If you enjoyed this video, if you like talking about books, we do that all the time here on this channel, so you can subscribe if you want to see more, and you know, follow the social media, all that good stuff. If you like games, I have a Twitch channel as well. I really hope that you had a good time watching this video. I hope you love the next book that you read, and I will see you soon in another video. Yeah, goodbye.